Sometimes, if you have a hankering to go on an exploration around the globe for another taste from another country that's not your own, you don't have to get a recipe book, you don't have to buy the kind of spices and condiments like I have behind me, and you don't have to go to a fancy restaurant. Sometimes, if you're lucky and you find places where they still exist, you can go to a food-making store. And when I say food-making stores, they don't cook the food for you, but they prepare the food as if they were back in their own country. Now, these are things that are long gone, and they're diminishing every year. But in the West Village, there still exists one of the great food-making companies that will give you an Italian meal, and it's Raffetto. Established in 1906, and they have boundless things. So, when you think of a place like this, when you're journeying around the world on the sea of flavors, think of it as a safe haven in the world of condiments.
Nestled in the ultra-hip and vibrant neighborhood of New York City's West Village, Raffetto is one of the great traditional Italian pasta makers in the city and probably the country.
So I'm outside Raffetto's and we're about to go in and see all the delicious things. And I'll tell you, it's going to take your eyes and merge them with your tongue. You'll see.
Raffetto's was established by, not surprisingly, by Mr. Raffetto. He had immigrated from Italy, as so many other people from Europe did at the time, coming through Ellis Island, and left with the name Raffetto.
Now, I don't know if Raffetto is his real name, because he came through Ellis Island. And people in Ellis Island were known to change people's names. And they, all right, it's a horrible thing, but, if they get this big Russian name and they go, your name is now Smith. Now, they did this to people who even had simple names. For example, my great-grandfather came through Ellis Island, and his name, before he came through Ellis Island, his name in Sweden was Anton Olsen. Which you would think, oh, Anton Olsen, like Jimmy Olsen. He worked for the Daily Planet with Clark Kent and Superman. But no, they couldn't have I don't know whether, maybe it was just the way he spoke. And they said, no, your name is Palmer. So that's what it was. He became Anton Palmer. And so you don't really know. But let's assume that Raffetto is his real name. And so let's say that Raffetto, and it's good, he has given this country comfort food for the past 100 years plus.
Established in 1906, Raffetto's has been providing authentic Italian food for more than a century. They sell imported olive oils and canned goods from Italy. They even sell a fizzy seltzer of lemonade, which is as much fun to watch as it is to drink. They sell homemade bread, including prosciutto cheese bread, all sorts of sausages, sweet, parmigiano, prepared meals, lasagnas, meatballs. They sell sauces, marinara, clam, even pink sauce. Now, it's risky to call a sauce just a color, but Raffetto's manages to pull it off. They prepare all sorts of raviolis and tortellinis in all sorts of flavors. Meat and spinach, wild mushroom, seafood, meat, manicotti, gnocchi, even pumpkin gnocchi. And of course, they make and sell pastas. Plain egg, spinach, parsley, rosemary, even saffron. Delish.
And this is not your grandmother's pasta or great-grandmother's pasta. It's a special pasta, and it's from Italy, or comes from Italy, and it may look a little foreign to you, but you should not discard it just because it comes from a different country. Now, Italy's, it's more similar than, say, if it came from the Middle East or Africa, unless, of course, you were African or from the Middle East. So I guess it also depends on your point of view. But let's not just discard it because it does not look like what you got in grade school. It comes from Italy. Now, because it doesn't look like the Italian food you are accustomed to and you may have gotten early in life, don't discard it. Now let me tell you this story. My grandfather was, I don't like to use the word simple man, but he was a simple man and he did not like change. So one summer, my mother goes out to visit him in Minnesota and decides that he has to have an authentic Italian meal. And they just opened up a trattoria, which is Italian for restaurant, but it means it's a fancier restaurant. And so my mother gathers everyone together and we're gonna go to the trattoria. Well, my grandfather is reluctant from the beginning. The waiter says, "What can I get you for dinner?" And my grandfather says, "I'd like spaghetti with meatballs." And the waiter says, "We don't have spaghetti and meatballs." My grandfather says, "I want spaghetti and meatballs." And the waiter says, "We don't have spaghetti and meatballs." My mother says, "Dad, please, would you just order something?" So he says, "Well, I'd like something that's similar to spaghetti and meatballs." So the waiter says, "Well, we have two types of spaghetti, we have two types of spaghetti that probably most like it. We have spaghetti bolognese and spaghetti, I think it's Milanese. I could be wrong, I'm trying to remember this." And my grandfather says, "Well, I want a meatball." So the man says, "Spaghetti bolognese, that has meat in it. Does it have a ball? A meatball?" "No, it just has meat sauce." And my mother says, "Please, Dad, would you get it? Please, would you try it?" My grandfather says, "All right, I'll get it." So then, the meal comes, and he has spaghetti bolognese. Now, I really like spaghetti bolognese. I've made it a few times. There's a New York Times recipe for it, and it's quite tasty. But it is not spaghetti with meatballs. And my grandfather looked at his bowl of spaghetti bolognese, and he looked like a 5-year-old who had been disappointed at Christmas. And then he shakes his head, and my mother says, "Please, Dad, would you try it?" And he tries it. And he kind of plays with his food, and that happens the rest of the night. He wasn't happy. My mother was crushed because she's always trying to please my grandfather, her father, though I don't know why she tries, because you know that in that situation, he is a stubborn man. So the next day, it's about 10:30, he comes downstairs, he goes, "Come on, we're going for lunch." We go to Jerry's Deli, which was one of his favorite spots, Jerry Deli. We go in there. And he orders and he says, "I'd like some spaghetti with meatballs." And the guy says, "Right, sure." And within 10 minutes, he brings it in a metal container and he whips it up. And then he tilts it to me and he says, "This is spaghetti with meatballs." Now, he had a point. That was spaghetti meatballs. Now, luckily, I am not like my grandfather, and I am far more adventuresome about what I ate. And I picked up a number of items at Raffetto's. And they had the pink sauce, and the tortellini, and a prepared lasagna.
And the lasagna was amazing. It was one of the best lasagnas I've ever had, and I devoured it.
God. Oh, God. It's got tomatoes and noodles and cheese, and my grandmother says, "Oh God, I love cheese." If you can have a dish that will make you remember your grandmother, that is a good dish. And this is one of those dishes. And it's not from here. It's from there. It's from a past part of Italy where they actually made authentic lasagna and tortellini and all the other stuff that they have in their store. I mean, it's like, I've often wondered, because my grandfather, he was Swedish. My great-grandfather, he was Swedish. And he came over in about 1880. And he took a boat. He was 12 years old. He really liked it because, actually, he said that being on the boat, he could eat all the food he could eat and wanted. Never happened before, never happened after. But he came to Ellis Island. This is like the food from a past generation coming through Ellis Island, coming to the Raffetto's, coming to my kitchen and allowing me to eat it. I mean, that's what happens when you allow yourself to travel to different societies and time travel in the world of condiments. Thank you kindly.